Hi there, this is Pat again. This is the first of a number of recordings, tutorials for quarter three. Now, quarter three is quite a bit more complicated than quarter two. The good news is you have over a week to be able to get these decisions in. And once you get the idea of quarter three, the rest of the game isn't that much more complicated. Okay, but that still means that you have to spend time looking at the market research data, finding how well you've done, your competitors have done, and changing your strategic position accordingly. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this particular one is to take you through marketing, because marketing is one of the big areas. Marketing and manufacturing, I think, are the two that probably require the most attention. Okay, so let me just, so this quarter, each quarter's got its own name, and this one is Enter the Market. So if you remember last quarter, you designed some brands, you set your factory up, you've opened at least one sales office, and here's where those three things come together. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk you through a couple of things. First, the industry news. Now, don't forget that the industry news is something that you should be reading every single quarter. Now, in terms of the seasonality trend, we explained this last time. This just goes to show that there are kind of peaks and troughs, cyclical troughs and peaks every year. And what it says is that there will be a kind of a boost in terms of demand, but then it started from a very low base. Okay, so you'll probably find that quarter four is quite buoyant, and then there might be a slight depression in quarter five and quarter six. But regardless of that, the demand will just continue to rise every quarter. Okay, so this trend is a little bit deceptive. On the one hand, you'll see that certain quarters, the business quarters like quarter four and quarter eight, are the kind of the most buoyant, but the demand will just continue to rise. So really what that means is in quarter five and six, you're going to be investing a lot of money into things which will make your company better. Okay, so you may be sort of less bothered about trying to sell vast amounts, but investing for the future. Okay, so that's that. So just bear in mind that that really is just a kind of very simplistic diagram, as is the one to the right, the regional economic trends. Now you can see that some of these regions here have curves that are slightly flatter. Some are going up more exponentially. So for instance, here Europe looks like it's on an upward trajectory in terms of the economy. Somewhere like the Middle East and Asia on a slightly flatter trend. So have a look at the news and the exchange rates. I mean, I'm convinced really the exchange rates are not going to matter, except maybe in the first couple of quarters. You know, if you can find a place to sell your brands that has a fairly weak currency, it costs you less to do business in that country. Having said that, of course, it may be that those aren't the most buoyant regions. And all this is saying here is that these five regions are all kind of notionally going upwards, but Latin America and Middle East and Asia look like the upward curve is fairly flat. Okay, so again, I think by the end of the game, if you've got sales offices in every single city region, then all of this stuff won't matter. If your brands are good, you'll do well. So the accounting for last quarter, now what I would probably do is get used to looking at this. Now, of course, last quarter was very straightforward. Okay, so here it says there's absolutely no revenues whatsoever because you haven't sold anything, but it tells you what you have spent. And if you wanted to break that down, you could click on each of these and it will give you a breakdown. But again, even at this point, it's very, very straightforward. Now, hopefully, there'll be no emergency loans, because if there are, that tells you that your financial management needs to be looked at. But I suspect that none of you should be in debt. Okay, It's from this quarter onwards that it starts getting a little bit trickier. Okay, so bear in mind that this particular company that I'm showing you is one from about 4 years ago. So I'm not giving away any trade secrets. Okay, so none of these numbers kind of make much difference to you. That it's not like it's one of your competitors. Okay, so get used to looking at this. Obviously, in quarter 3, you should have an additional column. If the increase in common stock hasn't appeared for quarter 3, you'll have a button down here that says load data, and that should load it automatically. For some reason, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so the first thing you ought to be doing really is going to finance and withdrawing all this money. Now, this particular team, they had 911,999 left in there from the previous quarter. Okay, and they decided for some reason that they would only withdraw $400,000, which means at the end of quarter 3, they still had over $500,000 invested in the deposit account. And let me tell you, they went into debt, emergency debt, okay, at the end of quarter 3. So let me make this absolutely clear. Withdraw all of your money from the deposit account from last quarter and don't put any more back in there, not until the end of the game. Okay, and if anybody doesn't do that, forgets to do that, I'm not bailing you out. Okay, so just please accept the fact that from now on, it starts to become risky because you have no idea what your sale is going to be. So one of the things that you had access to in terms of quarter 1 and quarter 2 was certain information. Now you don't have that, okay, because the revenues coming in are uncertain. And you're uncertain, therefore, how much you can afford to put back into the deposit account. Okay, well, let's go on to marketing, because this is really the point of this tutorial. Now, marketing looks at, I suppose, 3 main things. Brand management, which is building brands, which you did automatically last quarter. Well, not automatically, but you should have done. The second one is pricing. And the third one is advertising. Now, in addition to that, you can now buy market research. Now, not only can you buy market research, but you should be buying market research, because if you don't, I guarantee you, you won't have a clue what's going on next quarter. Okay, so under brand management, this is very similar to what you saw last quarter. Okay, so this is based on the market research that you had access to before. Okay, and these guys here, they designed 2 brands. Now, in this quarter, you might think, well, there's no point in me modifying anything because I don't know how good these brands are. But you might decide that you wish to design some new brands. You might even decide that you wish to amend and redesign brands that you've already got. Okay? In either way, it'll cost you money. And as you can see here, I can't actually design a new one because this game is finished. But if they wanted to redesign, let's say the Light W, which I presume is a workhorse, then it's going to cost them $60,000. And really, unless you've had some kind of moment of enlightenment that said, you know what, I think when I look at market research, I realize that what we designed last quarter isn't actually very good. Okay, so because you don't know that, you may as well just keep the brands that you had last quarter and try and sell them and just see how good they are. But if you want to either design a new one or modify your existing brands, in which case you click this copy to design new here, then just keep the ones that you've got. So that's quite straightforward. In terms of pricing, this is also going to be a let's try and see what happens. Okay, because clearly you've got the market research that tells you the price willing to pay for all segments in all cities of the world. Okay, which was this here. Now, obviously, if that's what they're willing to pay, so therefore, if you say, well, actually, the cost of production is much higher because the numbers of items I'm producing are very low, I will have to raise my selling price accordingly, over what they are apparently willing to pay. Then you are not going to sell anything. But you just have to accept that the cost of production, early stages of the game, so for instance, when you're producing 100 or maybe 250, the cost per item is going to be a lot more than you sell it for. Okay, so that's fine, because as the production goes up, the cost of production goes down, and then that selling price will probably start to make you a profit. Now, what I would say is just take this as a guide. Don't start doing kind of statistical analysis on it and trying to work out some break-even point. Really just look at that and say, okay, we might make a bit of a loss to start with, but that will soon put itself right when we start to increase the production levels. Okay, so what you have to do is, for each of the brands that you want to make available for sale, you've got to give it 5 pieces of information. Firstly is say what your sales priority is. Okay, what your salespeople should be prioritizing. Now, in this particular case, they've said the sales priority should be the light traveler, and the second should be the light workhorse. Now, when it comes to your web sales, they don't aim at any particular segment, whereas your local sales office will actually aim by segment. Okay, so this is probably more aimed at web sales than anything else, but nevertheless, you still have to give it a priority. Now, of course, there'll be a modify button down here. So to actually enter anything, click modify. If you want to make that item available for sale, then you must tick that box, because if you don't, the salespeople will not sell it. You might have built 400, but they're not going to sell any. Here is where you put your retail price. Okay, now that retail price, I don't quite know exactly. North America, let's have a look. So that's a traveler, North America. Okay, so they've decided to try and set the price quite low because they think, well, let's try and get some sales. Let's try and get the price quite low. Okay, so we think it might be below what the price willing to pay is, but they're also adding in what we call a rebate, a discount. Now, this rebate's interesting because actually not every customer in this game will take that rebate. It's like a discount, a special offer, introductory offer, £300 or $150 off in this case, and that will entice more people to come and buy your brand if it's good. Okay, and that depends on other things like advertising. So the rebate, when you take it off the retail price, would make the retail price $3,549. But not everybody will take that rebate. So you want to offer a generous rebate to start with, but not so you lose an absolute bag full of money. So you've got to decide what the price is and what rebate, if any, you will give. You don't have to. But if your competitors are, you're going to look way overpriced. This last one is what we call point of purchase display. Okay, now I'm not a marketeer. I don't teach marketing, but even I know that if you go into a sales office, there will be advertising in the sales office, probably cardboard cutouts advertising their brands. Okay, and as you can see here, it costs you £200 per brand. So each of those is a brand per sales office. So those two will cost $400. But that might generate more sales from people that walk into your showroom and see what you have to offer. Okay, so that's your price. When it comes to advertising, again, what you need to try and be doing is to give the customer an idea that you have what it is they want. Okay, so you have available to you the customer needs here, telling you or reminding you what you saw last quarter and what it is each of these segments says they want. And the same with use pattern. So when you design an advert, okay, you need to make sure that you say the most important things, because an advert only has so much space. Now, clearly, you need to read the rules about advertising. Look at the story, look at the lecture. There's lots and lots of material here. There's links to, endless amounts of help on this. Okay, so let's go back to the workspace. Let's look at an advert that these guys created. It cost them £30,000 to create the advert. And later on, you can actually get that advert to run either locally or regionally, depending upon what you want. What I would say is that local advertising is what they call a shotgun approach. Okay, it's not very specific, whereas regional advertising is much more specific. Okay, but actually it's more expensive. So you've got to try and balance that out. So let's look at this one here. So they've called this advert, this is the name of the actual advert, not the actual brand. So you have the option of, I think, up to about 9 priorities. Okay, 9 items on your advert that you think match with the needs and the wants and the uses of a particular segment. Now, what they've done is they said, right, well, the most important thing we think, although we're not sure, is to put the brand name. So you have the option whether you actually put the brand name in there. Now, one of the reasons why you might not is not so that the customers get a loyalty to a particular brand that you've created, but loyalty to the company itself. It might be advertising you as much as it is your brand. So you don't have to do that. Now, there's no right or wrong. What I would say is, like anything else in this game, try stuff out. This quarter is about learning. Okay, try some adverts with lots of priorities, some with far less, some where you mention the brand name, others where you don't, and see what the reaction is. Okay, you might sell 500 items this quarter, but you might not. What really matters is what you learn. Okay, so those are the adverts, and you can actually preview and see what it would like. Okay, which probably isn't that accurate, but nevertheless. So that's the adverts that you created, and this team from 3 or 4 years ago created 2 adverts. So if you've got a sales office, then you're probably going to want to create local media placement. Okay, so what they've said is, if you remember, they've got these 2 adverts here, and they said, right, locally, I want to run the advert for, I think it was the Traveller advert. I want to run that in Los Angeles 3 times. And each time it runs, it's, I'm trying to think, 8,000. That doesn't seem quite right. But they also want to run the other one once. Okay, so the total cost, and I'm not quite sure where that cost comes in, the total cost is at the bottom here, 29,503. Okay, so you're running your adverts a specified number of times. It's entirely down to you. What they do say is you shouldn't spend more than $100,000 on advertising in total between your local and your regional media placement. Okay, so ordinarily, running an advert once won't do a great deal of good because the customer might not see it. If you run it 5 or 6 times, then they'll catch it sometime on television or in paper. But for now, they're just trying stuff out, seeing what happens. Okay, see what the help, the lecture on this suggests you do in terms of number of times that you wish to run each of your adverts. So that's the local media placement. When it comes to regional media placement, you don't even need to have a web office to have regional media placement. Although it's more specific, what may happen is if let's say you've got a sales office in Los Angeles, but you also do regional media placement in North America, it's going to be advertising to people who are not going to buy your brand because you don't have a sales office there. Okay, so actually, on the one hand, it's quite specific because it's tailored to a particular brand, but it's also going to be unspecific because it's going to be advertising to cities that say, oh, good, we want your brand. And then they discover you can't, or they can't buy it. And that creates what's called ill will. Okay, those are sales that could be affected next quarter because some of your customers are pretty angry that they couldn't buy your brand, even though you advertised it in that region. Okay, now in terms of where you actually put your advert, okay, so that was local media placement. In terms of where you put it regionally, then the media preferences will help you. Okay, so let's suppose we want to advertise for the Traveller. This tells us what media the Traveller segment prefers. Okay, so clearly there's no point me advertising in science and technology because they don't read that. That's the lowest score. What they read are leading trade journals, new venture magazines, sports magazines, but specifically those two. Okay, so if I was going to decide where I was going to put my regional media placement for the Traveller, those two would have to be pretty strong contenders. Okay, so here we go. Look, we've got one of these for the Traveller being advertised in exactly those two places. Okay, for the Workhorse, let's just go back and have a look at the Workhorse. The Workhorse, general business magazines and sports magazines, and I expect, unless this team really made a bit of a mess of it, that that's where they will have advertised. Sports magazines, general business newspapers. Okay, so they've kind of done the right thing. They put their adverts in the place where they would expect their segment to be paying attention. Okay, now that's, so again, treat this as an experiment. If you can afford to have, let's say, 4 adverts and run maybe each a couple of times, you know, and you think, well, I don't know, should I put that in there? Should I put the brand name in there? Should I not? We'll do one with, one without. You could have them both advertising the same brand. And in terms of the effect it has on the sales, the bad advert won't undo the work, the good work of the good advert. But it might tell you something about what works and what doesn't. Okay. So one of the things you've got to do is when you've put your ads, and you've created ads and you put them places, is to check ad claims. If you get a tick next to it, it says that's fine. The advertising standards people are saying that your particular advert doesn't break any rules in terms of promising things that you absolutely cannot deliver. And so some of the things that people find is that they'll say, let's say in their regional adverts, they'll say, oh yeah, we sell to the whole region, or we have local support, but you don't, because you may not have a sales office in that particular region. So saying that you sell to that region, or saying that you have local support to that region, okay, or saying that your PC is the most powerful on the market when the market research tells you that it isn't, that's a problem. Okay, so if you have a cross next to it, there's something that you need to work on. And those are the kind of things I suggest you bring to your consultations. Okay, because we're more than happy to try and help you with that. Okay, what goes in your advert, that's entirely down to you. How many items you put in the advert, that's entirely down to you. Should you put your brand name in? Up to you. Okay. So the adverts will change or they should change every quarter as you learn. So the last thing I'll cover under brand management, under marketing, is market research. Now here, market research is by region. So if these guys wanted to buy market research in every single region, then they've ticked all the right boxes. As you can see, it's not cheap. Okay, but if, let's say, you want to know how effective your factory is, how happy your workers are, how happy and effective the workers in your sales office are, how many items you sold in a particular region, how many you sold, or how many your competitors sold in a particular region, you have to buy it for that region. So last year, we had people saying, I don't know how well I did. And I said, well, did you buy any market research for your area? No. Well, that'll be why. Okay, so you don't have to buy it all. You might say, look, I'm not interested in the Middle East and Asia, or Africa rather, because I have no intention of going in there just yet. That's fine. But you might not be able to find out where the gaps in the market are. Okay, so that's enough for marketing. Okay, do look at the help available because there is a lot. Okay, if you look under brand management and advertising, there is so much help there. Okay, so please, before you start asking us questions, have a look at this. But please bear in mind that this quarter is about trial and error. It's about just trying out. Your brands and your adverts will almost certainly be crap, really bad. But you might just have one that's actually rather good. Okay? So that gives you a slight advantage. That gives you something to build upon. If they're bad, fine. Your market research will probably tell you what your competitors are doing, where they're selling, what components they've got, and you can use that to try and steal some of their ideas. Okay? So I hope this helped. I will do another of these tutorials on sales and also another one on human resources and manufacturing. Okay, thanks for listening.